AITA for confronting my parents after my grandfather asked about my missing trust fund? When I turned 27, my grandfather, Robert, showed up with that calm smile of his that always meant trouble was brewing. He sat across from me, studying me as if he were finally closing a long overdue file, and then he dropped the question so casually it sent a chill down my spine. "Sarah, how have you been handling your trust fund? With the market growth over the years, it should be worth around $3 million by now." I blinked, certain I had misheard him. My what? I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. My parents, James and Victoria, went completely rigid. My mother opened her mouth, but no sound came out. My father stared down at his hands. They both looked terrified with a kind of primal fear you just cannot fake. Robert did not raise his voice. It did not even waver. He simply turned to them and asked again just as calmly, "Where did the money go?" That day my entire world was flipped upside down. But to really understand why, I need to back up a bit. My name is Sarah, and I work as a graphic designer. It was not a big, flashy firm with famous clients. It was a small agency in Brooklyn, the kind of place where you do a bit of everything, but I was proud of it. I had been there for 3 years learning the ropes, getting projects out the door, and just surviving. I lived with my friend Jessica in a modest walk-up apartment in Astoria, Queens. The building was constantly in need of repairs. The paint was peeling in the hallways, and there was a strange smell that no one could ever trace. And yes, every now and then a cockroach would make an appearance like it was a paying roommate. Still, it was my home. And this is where the part about my family gets complicated. My grandfather, Robert, had a lot of money, the kind of money you do not talk about because the numbers sound fake. He had made his fortune investing in tech back in the early days of Silicon Alley, when everyone else thought it was a fad. He saw the future and it paid off handsomely. He lived out in Connecticut, in a quiet, sprawling estate. I did not see him often, but we stayed in touch. We would text, talk on the phone every few weeks, and he always looked out for me in his own way. My parents, on the other hand, lived as if money was no object. They had a huge modern house in Greenwich, complete with a pool, a 3-car garage, and perfectly manicured lawns. They traveled to Europe every year, sometimes twice. My mother cycled through designer handbags like most people cycle through phones. My father was always in a crisp shirt, wearing an expensive watch, and driving the latest model Lexus. And then there was me. I had a student loan debt that had been hanging over my head since graduation. I owed $80,000, a real heavy, legally binding debt with unforgiving monthly payments. Between tuition, art supplies, and a few desperate choices I made to avoid dropping out, the number had ballooned. The worst part was not just the total. It was the $700 payment that hit my account every single month. Some months that payment left me with barely enough for groceries. When I graduated 5 years ago, my parents came to the ceremony. They hugged me, took photos, and smiled for the camera. Afterward, they handed me a wrapped gift. I honestly thought that maybe, just maybe, it was something to help me out, to give me a little breathing room. I opened it. It was a book on financial literacy. My dad patted me on the shoulder and said, "It's time for you to make your own way, honey." And that was it. I never asked my grandfather for money. Maybe it was pride or stubbornness, or just the fear of looking like I was only after his wealth. I kept telling myself I could handle it on my own. And I could, but sometimes that meant eating ramen for dinner several nights in a row, shopping exclusively at thrift stores, and learning to say, "I can't afford it," no matter how embarrassing it felt. Then a week before my birthday, my world came crashing down. It was a Tuesday afternoon. My boss called me into his office and closed the door. He had that look that tells you something bad is coming. "Sarah, I'm so sorry, but we have to make some cuts. The agency is downsizing." The whole thing lasted less than 5 minutes. I walked out with a cardboard box holding my things. My notebook, a few pens, the small succulent I kept on my desk, and a crushing weight in my chest. I had enough savings to cover maybe 2 months. Rent was due, my loan payment was coming up, and I was unemployed. That night I called my parents. I tried to sound calm, but my voice kept cracking. "Mom, I lost my job." "Oh, what a shame, dear," she said. I could hear her typing in the background, probably answering emails. "But you always land on your feet." "I'm really struggling, Mom. I don't know how I'm going to make rent next month." There was a short pause. "Well, you should have saved more," she said coldly, then immediately changed the subject. Anyway, what about your birthday? We have to do something special. I already made a reservation for Saturday. Where? She named a high-end restaurant in Midtown, the kind of place where the portions are tiny and the bill is enormous. Mom, that place is incredibly expensive. I can't afford that. What do you mean you can't? She replied, as if I were being dramatic. It's your birthday. Don't be difficult, and don't you even think about bothering your grandfather with your problems. He hasn't been feeling well. I felt a surge of anger and sadness, and I wanted to scream, but all I said was, okay. I hung up and just stared at the wall, hoping a solution would magically appear. Jessica was in the living room. She took one look at my face and knew. You look awful, she said, handing me a beer. I told her everything. The layoff, my meager savings, the phone call with my parents. Jessica's lips tightened. Your parents are on another planet. I don't know what I'm going to do, I said, my voice thick. Jessica took a deep breath. Don't worry about rent right now. I'll cover the whole thing for a little while. When you get back on your feet, you can pay me back whenever you can. Tears welled up in my eyes. I hugged her so tightly I thought I might break her ribs. Thank you, I managed to say. Words did not feel like enough. Saturday came way too quickly. I put on my one decent outfit, a simple black dress I had found at an outlet mall years ago. I applied a little makeup to hide how tired I looked and left early to navigate the weekend subway schedule. I got to the restaurant and my parents were already there, seated at a prime table. My mother was wearing a diamond necklace that looked heavy. My father's watch flashed every time he moved his wrist. Happy birthday, sweetie, my mom said, offering an air kiss. Then she looked me up and down. You look tired. Thanks, Mom. We ordered drinks. The conversation was excruciating. They talked about their next trip to St. Bart's, a new hotel they wanted to try, a piece of art my mom was considering buying. My dad mentioned some renovations to the house, a new car he was looking at. Not a single word about my job. I just nodded and smiled while my mind raced, thinking about my empty bank account and how Jessica was shouldering my half of the rent. Then the restaurant door opened and my grandfather walked in. Robert entered with his assistant, Ms. Davis. Even at 80 years old, he carried himself with an authority that made people notice. He wore an impeccable suit, his silver hair was perfectly styled, and he had a presence that commanded the room. My parents froze. My mom instinctively touched her necklace, as if for reassurance. My dad swallowed hard. There's my granddaughter, Robert said in a firm voice, walking straight to me. He gave me a real hug, one that felt supportive, not a quick performative greeting. Grandpa, I didn't know you were coming. I wasn't going to miss it, he replied, taking a seat. Ms. Davis stood nearby, attentive and discreet. Robert looked me right in the eye. How are you doing, Sarah? I glanced at my mother. She was glaring at me, her expression screaming, Don't you dare. Good, I lied. Just been working a lot. I like to hear that, my grandfather said. And I imagine you've been looking into that trust fund. I froze. What trust fund? The table fell silent. It was a heavy, suffocating silence. Robert's expression turned serious. The trust fund I opened for you when you were born, he said slowly. It was meant for you. You were supposed to gain control of it when you turned 25. I felt like I could not breathe. My parents sat like statues. My mother's face was ashen. Robert's voice dropped, but it was not soft. It was dangerous. James, Victoria, would you care to explain why my granddaughter knows nothing about this? My dad cleared his throat. There must be some misunderstanding. And while we're on the subject, my grandfather continued, cutting him off, what happened to the apartment I bought for Sarah when she turned 25? I gave you the keys to give to her. Apartment. I whispered, the word barely audible. The color drained completely from my mother's face. My dad was now intensely studying the floor. Robert pulled out his phone. Ms. Davis, get Mr. Adler on the line right now. Then he turned to the restaurant manager. I need a private room. We were moved immediately, as if my grandfather had given an order no one would ever dream of questioning. Once we were in the private room, I could not stop my hands from shaking. I did not know whether to cry, scream, or just walk out. About 20 minutes later, a man in a sharp suit walked in, carrying a briefcase and an expression that said he had seen it all before. "I'm Mr. Adler," he said, shaking my hand. "Your grandfather's attorney." Mr. Adler opened his briefcase, took out a stack of documents, and laid them on the table. "Sarah," he began, "your grandfather established a trust in your name at birth. It was opened with an initial capital of $1 million. With market growth, its current value should be approximately $3 million. My ears were ringing. Your parents were appointed as trustees during your minority. They were legally obligated to inform you of the trust when you came of age, and full control was to be transferred to you on your 25th birthday. Robert spoke directly. "Mr. Adler, tell me how much is in the account today." The lawyer typed on a tablet, his face grim. "The current liquid balance is approximately $150,000. It felt like a punch to the gut. "What?" I shot up from my chair, scraping it loudly against the floor. "Where is the rest of it?" Mr. Adler produced more papers. "I have the transaction history," he said, and began to read. "Consistent withdrawals over the past 7 years. Large wire transfers, mortgage payments on a property in Greenwich, high-end vehicle leases, home renovations, extensive travel expenses, first-class flights, luxury hotels." Every item he listed was like another blow. "And here," Mr. Adler continued, "an investment in a boutique hotel development under Mrs. Victoria's name. A total loss." My mom started to cry, but it was a familiar, calculated cry she used to get sympathy. "Please," my dad said, his voice cracking. "Let us explain." "Explain what?" I snapped, my voice finally returning. "That you handed me a book on financial literacy while you were spending my money? I have been drowning in debt for years. There were times I skipped meals because I had to choose between eating and making my loan payment." My dad refused to look at me. "We wanted you to learn responsibility," he mumbled. "Responsibility?" I said, my voice filled with a hot, burning rage. "What are you talking about?" Robert raised a hand, and the room fell silent again. "Now," he said, "the apartment. The one I bought for Sarah. Where is it?" No one spoke. My mom clutched her purse. My dad stared at his hands. "We rented it out," my dad finally confessed, his voice barely a whisper. Robert did not even blink. "Well, it was sitting empty," my mother tried to justify, her words tumbling out, "and we could make use of it. It was the logical thing to do." Mr. Adler typed again. "A 2-bedroom apartment on the Upper West Side, purchased 2 years ago, paid in cash," he said. "The fair market rental value in that building is around $5,000 a month." My throat felt raw. "So you were collecting $5,000 a month on my apartment while I was living in a walk-up in Queens?" My mother tried to say something, but the words caught in her throat. Robert stood up. His voice was calm, but it carried the weight of a final judgment. "Give me the keys." My mother's hands trembled as she fumbled in her purse. She pulled out a small set of keys. She held them for a moment, as if considering defiance. Then she saw my grandfather's face, and all her courage evaporated. She placed them on the table. Robert took them and slid them across to me. "These are yours," he said. 2 years late. Pick them up. They felt warm in my hand. I wanted to cry and throw them at the same time. They were mine, but they were also proof of every lie they had ever told me. Robert turned to Ms. Davis. "I want a full forensic audit. Everything they've touched for the last 7 years. Accounts, transfers, properties, purchases. Everything." "Yes, Mr. Robert," she said, already typing on her phone. A desperate cry escaped my mother. "You can't do this to us. We're family." Robert did not flinch. "Family doesn't steal from family." He pointed to the door. "Leave. My lawyers will be in touch." My parents stood up. My dad looked like he had aged 10 years in an hour. My mom was still trying to cry, but the performance was failing her. "Sarah," my dad said, his voice shattered. "Please." I just stared at him. "I already gave you everything." They walked out. The click of my mother's heels on the polished floor no longer sounded confident. They left hunched over, defeated. And still I felt no relief. I just felt empty. When the door closed, I began to tremble uncontrollably. Robert came over and wrapped his arms around me. "I'm so sorry, my girl," he whispered. "I should have been watching this more closely. I trusted them. They sent me summarized reports and I never dug deeper. How could they?" I cried into his jacket. "How could they do this to me?" "I don't know," he replied. "But we are going to fix what we can." He pulled back and looked at me. "Sarah, you decide what happens next. This can be reported to the authorities. They've gotten themselves into a very serious situation." I looked at the keys in my hand. I remembered all the nights I ate instant noodles. The shame of telling friends I could not go out. I remembered Jessica offering to cover my rent. "I don't know," I said. "I need to think." "Of course," my grandfather replied. "But there's one more thing." Ms. Davis spoke softly. "I found flight confirmations in their names purchased 3 days ago. One-way tickets from JFK to Costa Rica." I went cold again. My parents had come to my birthday dinner already planning their escape, ready to disappear with what little was left. And my mother had the audacity to tell me not to bother my grandfather. "I want to go home," I said weakly. Ms. Davis nodded. "I'll take you," my grandfather said. "And Sarah, that apartment is yours. You move in whenever you're ready." I got back to Astoria late that night, close to midnight. Jessica was waiting up in the living room with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. "Tell me everything," she said the moment she saw me. I sat down and let it all pour out. The trust fund, the stolen money, the apartment, the rent, my parents' faces, the escape plan. Jessica just sat there, her mouth open. "This sounds like a true crime podcast," she finally said. "Your parents or I don't even have words." "Neither do I," I replied. "But wait," she said, pointing at the keys in my hand. "You have an apartment?" "Yes," I said, my voice shaking. "And they rented it out for 2 years. They collected over $100,000 in rent." Jessica pressed her lips together. "That is infuriating." The next morning, Ms. Davis called me. "Sarah, I need to walk you through what we've found so far." We met at a coffee shop near Grand Central. She arrived with a laptop and a thick binder. "Your parents were methodical about this," she said. "They started with small withdrawals, then they got comfortable, and then they couldn't stop." She showed me bank statements, transaction records, property deeds. Seeing it all on paper was different. This was not a family argument anymore. It was a documented pattern of behavior. "We're compiling everything," she explained. "And the firm has already filed motions to freeze their accounts and place liens on any assets purchased with the funds, at least temporarily, while this is sorted out." "And they can just do that?" I asked, my head spinning. "We can request it from the court," she answered. "And given the circumstances, they've acted swiftly." That same week, she confirmed that temporary freezes were in place. The legal process to force the sale of their assets had begun. It was not magic. It was a mountain of paperwork, legal notices and court filings, but it was moving forward. My parents no longer had access to anything. The Greenwich house was tied up in legal proceedings, as was a vacation home they had bought in the Hamptons. The luxury cars were repossessed. My phone was blowing up with calls from unknown numbers, texts from my dad, voicemails from my mom. I did not answer any of them. Jessica was my rock. One afternoon, she said, "Do you want to go see your apartment?" Honestly, yes. We took her old, reliable Honda. We drove into Manhattan and pulled up in front of a beautiful pre-war building on the Upper West Side. A doorman greeted us politely. "Are you Sarah? I was told to expect you." I nodded. We went up to the 3rd floor. When the door opened, reality hit me hard. It was a beautiful 2-bedroom with hardwood floors, huge windows, and it was fully furnished with tasteful, well-maintained furniture. In a desk drawer, I found the rental agreements. Seeing those numbers, $5,000 a month for 2 years, was a fresh stab of pain. While I was struggling to pay my $1,200 a month in Queens, they were collecting a small fortune from my property. That night, my grandfather called. "We've recovered a significant portion," he told me. "There's still a long way to go, but we've made progress." "And my parents?" I asked, not sure why. "They've been removed from the house," he replied. "They're staying in a cheap motel off the New Jersey Turnpike, whatever they could afford with the cash they had on them." Your father found a job and so did your mother. They've signed an acknowledgement of debt and a restitution plan. It's not much, but it's a formal start. I felt a strange mix of emotions. It was not pity, it was just complicated. The following days were a whirlwind of packing. Jessica helped me. With every box I filled, I felt like I was shedding a piece of the life I had been forced to live. I'm going to miss you, she said, trying to smile. My chest tightened. Jess, you saved me when I had nothing. You offered to pay my rent. Because you're my friend, she replied, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Let me do something for you now, I told her. My grandfather has connections. I want to see if he can help you find a better job. Jessica was hesitant. You don't have to do that. I do, I insisted. You were there for me while my own family was robbing me. Robert agreed without a second thought. He made some calls. Jessica had a few interviews and within weeks, she landed a position at a major investment bank with a much better salary and real benefits. When she told me, her eyes filled with tears. Sarah, I don't know what to say. I didn't know what to say when my parents did what they did either, I told her. But here we are. As the investigation continued, more truths emerged. My dad had not held a steady job in years. He just went through the motions pretending to go to an office. My mom's boutique business had failed spectacularly, and instead of accepting it, she had clung to the illusion of success. They were not rich. They were frauds living a lie on my dime. Their country club friends, the ones who were always around, vanished the moment the scandal broke. People love the appearance of wealth, but they run from the mess. My grandfather also made me face something I had avoided my whole life. He set me up with financial advisors, explained investment strategies, and taught me how to read statements and ask the right questions. Never trust someone else to understand your money for you, he told me. Not even family. 3 weeks after that birthday dinner, an unknown number called. I answered without thinking. Sarah. It was my mother. Her voice was different. Smaller. I almost hung up. Please, she said quickly. Just listen. We're at a motel. Your father got a job at an insurance agency. I'm working as a receptionist. We have nothing. I let out a short, bitter laugh. You have exactly what you left me, I replied. Nothing. We're your parents. No, I said, my voice firm. Parents don't do this. They don't watch their child struggle while they live off her inheritance, and they don't plan an escape to another country. I heard a sob on the other end. We're in therapy, she said. We really are. And we're making payments. I need time, I told her. I just wanted you to know, she whispered. Don't call me, I said. If I ever want to talk, I'll find you. She was crying for real this time. I could hear it. I hung up the phone. That night I sat in the living room of my new apartment, with its big windows and quiet stillness, just looking out at the city lights. Jessica showed up with tacos and sodas like she had a sixth sense for when I was breaking down. Are you okay? She asked. I don't know, I said. They're my parents, but at the same time, I feel like I don't even know who they are. Jessica sat with me. You don't owe them anything, she told me. Your family is the people who show up, your grandfather and me. It hurt to hear, but it was also a relief. A few weeks later, my grandfather had a health scare. It was not critical, but it was a sharp reminder that time is finite. It shook us both. We started seeing each other more, having dinner once a week, talking about things we had never discussed before. He told me stories about his past, and I told him about my plans for the future. A year passed. I did not go back to another agency. With my grandfather's encouragement, I started my own freelance design business. It started small, a client here and there, but word of mouth spread. I got organized. I rented a desk at a co-working space in Soho. I hired a freelance assistant, then another. I was not getting rich overnight, but for the first time my life felt like it was mine, built by my own effort and my own decisions. Jessica was thriving at her new job and got her own apartment. We still met up for coffee on Sundays. My parents were still in therapy. I knew because their restitution agreement, which kept them out of more serious legal trouble, required proof of counseling and consistent payments. They paid a small amount each month, but they never missed one. We did not speak for that entire year. 2 years after that fateful birthday, I was in my office meeting with a client when my assistant buzzed me. "Sarah, there's a woman here to see you," she said. "She says her name is Victoria." A dull thud echoed in my chest. After the client left, my mother walked in. She looked completely different. Her hair had visible gray roots, her skin was bare of the expensive makeup she used to wear, and she was dressed in simple, clean clothes from a department store. She just stood there, as if she were not sure she had the right to breathe the same air. "What do you want?" I asked. "To apologize," she said, her voice trembling. "Your father, he couldn't bring himself to come." I pointed to a chair. "Sit." She sat down carefully. "We were wrong," she said. "So wrong. That doesn't even begin to cover it," I replied. She nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "Therapy has helped us see we got addicted to that life. To the spending, to the status." "You stole from me," I said, cutting through the excuses. "Yes," she answered. "At first, we told ourselves it was just a loan, that we'd pay it back. Then it was the car. Then a trip, and then we just couldn't stop." I stared at her. "And you watched me struggle," I said. "You let me." Her voice broke completely. "Yes. We made up this story that it was good for you, that it was building character. But that was a lie. We just didn't want to stop spending." She pulled an envelope from her purse and placed it on my desk. "What is this?" "It's not money," she said quickly. "It's a letter. From your father and me. Our therapist told us to write it all down, to take full responsibility." I did not reach for it. My mother took a pained breath. "I don't expect you to forgive us," she said. "We don't deserve it. But I needed you to know that we finally understand what we did. We destroyed our family for things, for a life that wasn't even real." I held her gaze. "You were going to run away," I told her. "To Costa Rica." She looked down and nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Yes. We were so lost. We thought if we just left, we could pretend none of it ever happened." I was silent for a long moment. "Your father is doing better," she continued, wiping her cheeks. "Having a routine, a simple job, it's been good for him. And I'm learning to live a simpler life. We have a small apartment, we take the bus, we cook at home. It's like starting over." I looked at her, my expression hard. "Are you here to ask for something?" "No," she said instantly. "I just wanted you to see me, to know that we're trying to be better people. And that someday if you ever want to," maybe. She trailed off. I took a deep breath. "I'm not ready," I told her. "And I might never be." She nodded, swallowing hard. "I understand." I took the envelope, not as a sign of forgiveness, but as a small step toward closure. "But keep going to therapy," I told her. "And keep making the payments. And don't ever look for a shortcut again." "We won't," she whispered. "Thank you for seeing me." She got up and left. After the door closed, I stared at the envelope for a long time. That night in my apartment, I opened it. It was several pages in my mother's and father's handwriting. They detailed what they had taken, the lies they had told themselves, and how the deception had spiraled out of control. They apologized over and over again. I did not cry. I just felt a quiet finality. I put the letter in a drawer. Maybe I would read it again someday, maybe not. I had dinner with my grandfather and told him my mother had visited. "What would you do?" I asked him. Robert looked at me with the wisdom of his years. "That's for you to decide, my girl," he said. "They are making restitution, and what they do from this point on matters. But you can't let your life revolve around them. Did you forgive them?" I asked. He shook his head. "They stole from you," he said. "That's not something you forgive easily. But I will tell you this. Anger, if you hold on to it for too long, will burn you from the inside out." Jessica, as always, was more direct. "They're toxic," she said. "But they're also your parents. If you ever want to try having a relationship with very clear boundaries, I'll support you. And if you never want to see them again, I'll support that too." My business continued to grow. I hired 2 full-time employees, then a third. We moved into a bigger office space. The money recovered from the trust was reinvested, and this time I understood every single transaction. It was no longer some abstract number. It was real, and it was mine to manage. One year my dad sent me a birthday card. It just said, "Happy birthday, Dad." No excuses, no drama. I did not reply, but I did not throw it away. My mother sent a simple holiday card in December. Thinking of you. I looked at it for a moment, then put it with the other one. It was not forgiveness. It was just an acknowledgement that no matter how much I wanted to, I could not erase them from my story. And despite everything, I was happy. I had my apartment, my business, my grandfather, and Jessica. They were the ones who had truly cared for me. That was my real family. And the life I was building with my own 2 hands, no one could ever take that away from me. Because in the end, the money was only part of the betrayal. What hurt most was realizing that my parents had been asking the wrong question all along. It was never, can she make it on her own? It should have been, are you okay? Comment. I think what really stays with me from this story is the quiet power of setting boundaries. It is a profound act of self-respect to decide what you will and will not accept in your life. You learn that true family is not always about blood, but about who shows up with kindness when you need it most. Healing is not always about immediate forgiveness, but about taking back control of your own narrative. You get to build a life that feels so true to you that the past no longer has power over your present. Taking responsibility for your own peace is one of the bravest things you can do. You have the right to protect your emotional well-being above all else. Remember that your worth is not defined by how others treat you, but by how you choose to rise. I hope you find the courage to choose yourself, always. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.